Bliss and Grit is an entirely listener-supported show. Supporting us is also designed to support you through keeping the episodes rolling, but also through rewards for your donation, like a getting started guide, a private forum, and downloadable meditations. To become a supporting member, you can visit patreon.com/Bliss and Grit. Hello, beautifuls. You are listening to Bliss and Grit. I'm Brooke Thomas, and I'll be joined soon by my dear friend and co-host, Vanessa Scotto. On the show, we're having conversations about the embodied spiritual path. Our main themes revolve around awakening, being human, and healing. We are very happily back from our 6-week break, and in today's conversation, we are talking about what we are talking about, or what are we talking about? So in our 6 weeks off, we had a chance, delightfully, to integrate, to reflect, and to deepen into what is up here at Bliss and Grit. What is it we're on about? What are we doing? What do we really care about? And we realized that we haven't spoken so directly that this show is about what we can call awakening. Now, for many of you who are longtime listeners, that's not going to be any kind of surprise at all. But if we're choosing to get really direct that that's what we're devoted to, then it makes sense, of course, to talk about what is awakening. Why has it gotten, in many ways, a bad rap or a weird rap? Why were we so shy about admitting it in the past that that's what we're talking about? And what is it again? Vanessa and I discussed what it means to us to, quote, wake up, unquote, by looking at the differences between object-based reality and subject or present moment experience-based reality. We get at new angles on what the ego is, and we open up about why we truly care about this and why we refuse to be slaves to our own conditioning anymore, quite frankly. If you have been enjoying the show, we would love to read your review on iTunes or on our Facebook page, which is Bliss and Grit. You can also head over to blissandgrit.com and subscribe if you want to get our weekly digest, which comes out on Fridays. And you can become a supporting member over at patreon.com/Bliss and Grit. There's information about that on the website as well. The last thing before we head into the conversation is that Vanessa and I do swear on occasion. So if you're in company where you don't want that to be proliferating around the room, you may want to wear headphones. Okay, here we go.
Hello, Brooke.
Hey there, how are you?
We're back.
We're back.
If any of you are tuning in for the first time, Brooke and I took a 6-week
a little summertime off.
Yeah, a little summertime off. We had a lot of travel, and you know, there's something about talking a lot where you just need to take a moment and go inward and not try to express the thoughts for a bit. So we did that. And maybe now we'll have a lot to say. And I'm banking on we do have a lot to say.
I think we do.
So let's see. So y'all, this is not going to be perhaps the easiest for me to articulate. But we're on this break, and Brooke and I were doing a lot of tuning in and meditating and resting and reflecting. Also on Instagram, I've been asking a lot of questions of you guys and seeing who you are and what you're interested in. And somewhere along the line, we realized that this show is most specifically about the human awakening journey. And that we're not sure we ever made that explicit.
And that in many cases, particularly at the beginning of the show, we cloaked that, not with some kind of like devious hiding our dark secret, but I think that we were shy and embarrassed, and we felt vulnerable, and we felt like we didn't have a right to talk about it, and we thought people would think we were weird and all of those things that you think. So I guess we're coming out of the awakening closet.
I know for some of you who are very perceptive and have picked up all along that we're talking about awakening, this may sound really funny to hear. But when Brooke and I were discussing what to talk about in today's episode prior to getting onto this call, I was like, well, let me go back and look and see, have we ever just done an episode on awakening? Obviously, we must have. We've interviewed teachers all about awakening. They're all teachers that, well, except for one or two, but they're all teachers mostly that have had awakenings already. We talked about the awakening nervous system. We talked about awakening FOMO, but never did we just discuss our views and experiences on awakening.
And that, this is what we do here. That's what we want to have conversations about here.
Yeah. So welcome us out of the closet, everybody, the awakening closet, where I'll just say for myself, I stayed hidden. I think, Brooke, you pointed to the main cause, primarily embarrassment. I think I must have identified most of my life intellectually, and I wanted to seem like the person who wasn't woo-woo, wasn't weird. I wanted my beliefs and philosophies to maybe to say have lineage behind them, have stock and cred behind them. So I've spoken on the show before about being an acupuncturist and saying that was a beautiful, credentialed way of saying I believe in energy without having to say I believe in energy. And I feel with awakening, it's always been more comfortable to fall back into the Buddhist position on enlightenment. It's rare. It almost never happens. You aim for it without ever having an expectation you'll get it. And it's grounded in this lineage of sort of hard work via meditation and sacrifice. And it feels really respectable. And I have no problem admitting that I was curious about enlightenment. But awakening, as we discuss it in modern times, specifically as consciousness keeps evolving, has a much different flavor than those old school enlightenment teachings that I had participated in. So you want to take it from here, Brooke, and give a little flavor to that, a little color?
Sure. Well, for me, it's very similar, right? Why wouldn't we talk about it? And I can think now, not that I have many friends who do listen to this show and many friends who don't and have no interest, which is great, actually. Just in the sense that we all get to have a diversified kind of person that we're with, that I don't need friends who are super into the spiritual path. And yet there's a part of me, there are a few friends I can think of where there's a reason why I wouldn't want to discuss this stuff. What are you talking about? Your work life revolves around enlightenment teachings, awakening. And so a part of what I think is really useful in this conversation is, why does it get this reputation to even discuss this as being so out there? And what are we actually talking about? And of course, anyone who listens to the show knows what we're talking about. We're not suddenly talking about something new. We're just saying this, it's about a certain dimension of reality or perspective on reality, experience of reality that's different from what most of us as human beings are doing around these parts, meaning on the globe. And I think that it gets a bad rap for the same reason that saying you're on a spiritual path gets a bad rap, which is because, it's deserved. I'm a Rolfing practitioner, and a lot of people have this idea that it must be extremely painful. It's a terrible word, and it has a reputation. It has a bad rap for being really painful. And it's not really painful if you have, a practitioner who is thoughtful and current and all of those things. But its reputation was kind of deserved. In the 60s, people would come out of a Rolfing session bruised, and that was a sign of whatever. So the spiritual path gets a bad rap because it's kind of deserved. Not what spirituality actually is, but the fact that there are so many people who, instead of having an experience of or teaching about or participating in a community about actually experiencing freedom, they're wearing a Halloween costume of the spiritual person, whatever that particular community condones as the proper costume and by costume, I also mean persona. We've talked about the slow blinkers and things like that. So there's a falseness that I think is a very normal, stage for all of us. So we've talked about spiritual bypass before. So I'm not saying like those assholes. Like I do think that there is something, if we're ego identified, there will be some period of time where we're like, is it like this? Is it like this? Because all the ego knows how to do is to wear different identities. Does it go like this? Does it go like that? But it's not what spirituality actually is for. It's not about becoming a certain type of person with certain kinds of interests, with certain kinds of things around their house or jobs even, or whatever. So it gets a bad rap for that reason. I also think that once you start talking about a perspective of how you experience the world, yourself, and your life, that's different from, let's say, what our species does do and mostly has done, there is a lot of potential for people to be abusive. And so you and I have that, dog-eared that we want to do a whole episode on that. But you can look around and see, and there are gurus behaving badly. There are people that are getting lost in this weird, worshipful kind of way, blah, blah, blah. So I just want to say, yes, all of those things really exist in the spiritual world. Those things are all real things. Bypass, the spiritual Halloween costume, gurus behaving badly, abusive gurus, abusive spiritual people and practitioners. That's all true. We're not talking about that. We're acknowledging the reality of those things, and that will get covered in other episodes, and it has. So if it's not those things that we so commonly see, what is it? And we will do this so fucking imperfectly because it's the only way that it can be done, because it's not an idea. It's not a word. It's not an instruction. It's not a blueprint to success. It's an experience, and it's a journey that people can only go on the inside. So we're going to talk about what we think it is and what we've experienced, or some Cliff's Notes version of that, with the full acknowledgement that is far from the whole enchilada. But we need to at least point out, why? Because I can imagine, let's say I don't care about awakening or enlightenment teachings or spirituality, and I happen upon this episode. It's why do you guys care? Why do we care? Why is that what we want to make the focus of our personal and professional lives?
What do
Vanessa?
you think?
I just set that one up to be super loaded for you. Well, I would be happy to, instead of just forcing you into that particular corner. My experience has been that, and I'll just keep it real close to me instead of making it about the world out there, because I only have me. My experience has been that I have done an awful lot of things to navigate a human life, all of which I have found incredibly useful. So none of them are about that didn't work, chuck it in the trash can. So that's not what I'm saying. I've done things like therapy. I've participated in recovery communities because I'm a sober person. All kinds of things, tons and tons of holistic healthcare. It's my field, body work and craniosacral and acupuncture and meditation and, blah, blah, blah. And there's a way that I could just make them jobs to do on the side. And okay, so before we started recording, we were talking about how if we want to do let's boil it down to one thing, which I don't know that we do, but for this moment, if we want to boil it all down to pointing in a direction of what are we talking about when we talk about awakening, it's the difference between making everything in existence into an object and letting everything be a sovereign, unfolding experience. As I'm saying it, I'm those words are So flawed. So making everything into an object, right? I can make me into an object. In the examples I was just giving, I can make my healing journey into an object. Object means it's something separate from me, including I am a separate object from life, and I can control it. I can control it based on ideas I have about an outcome I want or don't want. And so I can either pull things towards me or push them away. I can like or dislike. I can should or shouldn't. But everything is a separate globule of thing, which is very cognitive, right? So I can make people into objects. I can make my job. I can make my emotions into objects. I can make my healing journey into an object. You know, like an emotion object. I feel sad. I shouldn't feel sad anymore, right? Like it's an object. Instead of just sadness is here, it's moving through. That's an experience.
Or I am a sad person.
I am a sad person.
I am. Life will be better when I'm not sad.
Exactly. I shouldn't have to feel sad. This isn't fair. Like objects require that you have definite control-based opinions about the thing that you're making into an object. Awakening is the process by which I'm not going to go, like, there's no blueprint, right? And we interview lots of beautiful teachers who have, that's why we have so many phenomenal teachers in the world. They all have their different pointers, or as Matt Kahn said when we interviewed him, they're all just cab drivers, you know? They just take you on their own route, whatever their route is, but then they drop you off and they're like, see you later, bye. So
here's your soul.
Here's your soul. Welcome to your soul. So process aside, what happens from an awake perspective is everything is just an unfolding experience that has its own right to exist and worth exactly as it is. So I feel sad becomes just sadness moving through. Or let's say the healing journey stuff, right? It doesn't mean you change your behaviors. Like I don't sit in a room and stare at a wall now. If I suddenly have this desire, like I really want to do a craniosacral session today as a part of healing or whatever, instead of I hope it finally fixes me and then a million thoughts about it, I'll never be fixed. I've done this so many times before. Whatever. It's literally just a desire, and you book the appointment and you go and you have the experience, and whatever transpires, transpires. And that's it. It's just moving through your life. I'm doing this very poorly, aren't I?
I think we should. Yeah, I think we. Yeah. I think we should add on to it though, because the concept of object consciousness is actually quite deep and rich, and sometimes for people complex, depending on how close they are to the material. So Brooke and I were saying one of the dilemmas is we didn't, quote unquote, prepare for this talk. I mean, we're preparing our whole lives, but we didn't make sure to read and get ourselves articulate. But I do have one quote that I want to read that I think can build on where you're going.
Preparation on the side.
I was prepared. Okay. So this quote is from A.H. Almas, who is a really beautiful awakened teacher who gives awakening teachings. It's from the book Facets of Unity. We'll put the book in the show notes. Okay, so here's the quote. He says, "The ego is a psychic structure that is based on crystallized beliefs about who we are and what the world is. We experience ourselves and the world through the filter of this structure. Spiritual awakening involves connecting with those dimensions of experience obscured by ego structure." So now, obviously, this is just one little piece of what we're talking about. But if we're going to talk about object consciousness, we can build on it from this quote. So you might notice, A, he spoke about the ego. So in the conversation of awakening, we can understand, and you've heard this from a lot of the teachers we've interviewed, and if you haven't, go back and listen to them, right? You can begin to understand that the ego structure is what prevents us from seeing our already awakened nature, from experiencing life as it is, right? The ego structure is something that it seems, Brooke and I feeling our way through this, it seems all humans have. However, it seems as if it's rigidified to greater and lesser degrees. So, depending on your early upbringing, maybe depending on your soul's journey, if there's such a thing as that, whatever the case may be, depending on different factors of your individual experience, your ego may become more rigidified or maybe looser and more in contact with the dimension of the soul. Right? Making sense so far? Mm-hmm. So when A.H. Almas points to the ego as a psychic structure that's based on crystallized beliefs about who we are and what the world is, that's when you're talking about objects. Objects can't change. Objects are predictable. Objects are there for your gratification, or they're there and they create pain. They are crystallized into something that you push or pull. Then the second part is that these belief systems about who we are and the world, which are implicit, they are woven into the structure of this ego personality, obstruct us from seeing the other dimensions of experience, from knowing them. I think if we look at it really simply, I kind of like to point back to Matt Kahn and Locke Kelly, who we interviewed back to back, and the way that they looked at it. We can be in the operating system of the soul, or as Locke Kelly would say, awake awareness, or we could be in the operating system of the ego. The ego can only relate to the world through object consciousness. It's what it does. It pushes, it pulls, it tries, it strives, it pretends. Poor us, these egos don't know that they can basically trust the universe, that they are implicitly good, that they are not separate, that they are one, and that they're whole and lovable as they are. We don't know that. So these egos develop as an attempt to try to get that. And then everything becomes an object, including ourselves, that either bring us closer or farther. As we loosen the crystallization of that ego structure, for me, it's been like I can taste more of the dimension of experience of the soul. Sometimes I rest there completely for moments or days or months. Sometimes the ego clouds it over again, but I have more relationship with it, just like I know the sun is behind the clouds, like I know it's there. Mm. And it's profoundly relieving, right? It's profoundly relieving. Like when you were talking about why do we care about awakening? And, you know, I've actually been thinking about that question for probably the whole 2 years we've been doing this show. Like, why do I care about it? And do I really want to be speaking about it? Why not just speak about love? Like something that we can all access so easily, something that we can find within our hearts, like in this very second. You know, why not just speak about love? Like, why bother speaking about awakening? Especially when so many teachers say, oh, it's out of your control. It's just grace, right? It'll happen or not, right? Why bother? And so I really ponder it. And I think about, I remember something Locke Kelly said. I don't know if he said it in our interview, but he said it in his book where he said, essentially, spiritually sensitive people can't be fulfilled unless they awaken. Mm. And I was like, damn. And as I go deeper and deeper into my own experience of it, I'm like, of course I care to talk about awakening, because ultimately there is this profound state of rest, ease, wholeness, spontaneity, aliveness that lies within us. And it is merely our conditioning and pain and circumstances and perceptual filters that keep us from experiencing it. Mm. And nothing but tasting that depth of reality is going to change that. It's just going to be a different game a different costume, a different goal we're striving for. But it never freed me. It never freed me. And I'm not saying I'm free now. These are awakening conversations, as in the process of it. But I am saying that the more I've been able to realize, recognize, live from my soul, my awareness, the more real I feel. The more alive I feel, the more at rest I feel, the less I feel I have to try, do, strive. That's my very long answer.
Well, we both get to give very long answers. I think that's...
Yeah. I don't even remember the question, so I don't even know if that was an answer.
No, it was perfect. And you brought it back around to why. I forgot that Locke said that about, that if you're a spiritually sensitive person, or whatever the phrasing was that he used, that you won't be fulfilled. And I think it's because at that point, you're really up against, meaning you can really see and feel and experience the futility of just trying out a new strategy, or just longing for another thing, or no, really this time the grass really will be greener over there, or no, really this time I do need to be hypervigilant and guard against catastrophe or whatever. You really you've just done it enough. And I don't know. I don't have a perspective where I can see, is that because across multiple lifetimes? I honestly don't know. I went into this process believing fully in multiple lifetimes, and now I don't know if I do. But that's a story for another day, which is just to say, I don't know. I don't know what causes this kind of maturation or ripening or desire would probably be the best word for a person. But there is an experience where you're just it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work to try out a new ego strategy. And, for me, I have been, since I was a child, really hyper aware, I don't know why, of human suffering. I mean, really, as a child, I'll still say to my mother things that were going on with the adults in different households in our neighborhood. And she's like, how did you know? I had my energy spidey sense feelers in every household in that neighborhood, and I could feel the pain of that neighborhood. And it was a very densely pain-bodied neighborhood because it had it had a lot of ladder climbing and striving and narcissistic agenda stuff, which just means people hurt each other a fuck ton, in those kinds of scenarios. And it's the thing that I can't turn my back on, is how much we all suffer, including me, because of living from object consciousness. And so I spent a lot of my life doing the do-gooder thing, thinking, that I could let's say I live in a city with a million stray cats, thinking that I could be the one that saves all the cats, right? I'll just get all of the cats in my house and just devote my life to that. There was this sense of if I can just put out all the fires, if I can just make everything better for everyone, which I think for those of us who are empaths, we've felt that way a lot. And it's exhausting, it's overwhelming, it's fatiguing, and it's belief in the disgusting world out there, which is not to say turning your back on the fact that people suffer. It was actually for me a getting closer to yeah, wow, oh my God, it's so thick, it's so dense, it's so senseless. It's just the merry-go-round. It just keeps going and going and going. And the ego just keeps putting on a different hat that just causes more harm and more harm. And for whatever reason, this process for me has been so much about, for sure, myself, because it's all I have, but also this particular stitch in my being of, I can't take it, how much humanity suffers. And I realize I can't go out there and save the totality from itself. I remember once sitting with Amota Ma, and she was the idea that you can save the totality from itself is ludicrous. And I got relieved, and then I got really mad, and then I got confused, and I went through all of the stages with that. And she's right. And if we are the totality, what we can do is start to do something other than putting on a different Halloween costume, ego Halloween costume. So do something different than making everything into objects, which is a process, as I've mentioned before. But just through the process, then we're really getting at the root structure of what I particularly find intolerable about being a human being. And so for me, that's a part of it, is like, oh, not because I can wave a magic wand and make people care about what I care about or make people wake up or any of that stuff, but I can do what's really true, alive, and juicy for me, which is to be here with you, having these conversations, and to be with all the people in our lovely Bliss and Grit community who, for whatever reason, found us and care about being here and being in these conversations, whether by listening to them or being on the forum or whatever. That's just super nourishing. That's the part that I can do. And so I care because I really believe that if any one of us can make the journey to a different operating system, let's say the operating system of the soul, to use technology jargon, then of course we all can. And if we can, like, I can't even imagine a world without object consciousness. But I like to believe it's possible, and like, that's fucking heaven on earth. And I believe it's possible. And I believe that's what all the sages cared about preaching, right? Like one of my favorite Jesus quotes, the kingdom of heaven is spread out before man, but he does not see it. But we can see it. So like more and more of us, I feel like if we can do our own internal process, I really do believe that it will spread like wildfire. That's really exciting to me. And it feels a hell of a lot more useful than like deciding that the world out there is disgusting, hopeless, and trying to put out all these fires out there.
Well, that's just objectifying the world again.
Exactly. And objectifying the disgusting, dysfunctional world, which is not to say that I couldn't easily give you 50 examples right now of things that break my heart in a million pieces. But it's just, is that the solution? To turn it into an object and be against it. And, I have found for myself, no. So that's all I have. That's the life I'm going to lead.
As soon as you make the world out there disgusting, just to use that language, you've turned it into a solid crystallized object. Mm-hmm. There's no dimension to it. So that we can also say, we know can't be totally true, right? Because there's so much dimensionality. It's also beautiful. It's also mysterious. It's also touching, right? So just to point back to what you were saying about object consciousness, depending on our experiences, maybe depending on the quality or flavor of this being that is Vanessa or Brooke or whoever you are listening, depending on these different factors, you'll objectify the world as disgusting. Someone else will objectify it as like nothing but love. Someone else will, but are we in actual relationship with it if we've crystallized it? Mm-hmm. Well, the answer is no. Right? And as much as we objectify others, we have to objectify ourselves. And the self-objectification is the most painful part of it all. I mean, to feel like I am not real, I am not fluid, I can't exist as I am, I have to do the things to get the things, and to anticipate it will only be better when said things come, or I will only be deserving of when. These are the states of self-objectification. I mean, if you've all been listening to us for a while, you've heard me talk about the Four Noble Truths from Buddhism. And that was one of the first things that drew me in because like you, Brooke, of course, I was aware of suffering always. I also always knew I wanted to help somehow, make a difference somehow. So who knows why there are spiritually sensitive souls? What is it, right? What creates it? I don't know, but many of you can track back to awareness always being heightened, right? And as that awareness was heightened, it created sort of a state of unrest. Like there are these things that I can call problems and they're uncomfortable and I didn't feel real. Actually, I had quite a lot going on back then. But I would look at the Four Noble Truths and I'm like, I believe this. He said, there's suffering in the world. You can do something about that suffering. It lies within you. Here are the steps, right? And that doesn't mean you can stop starvation per se, although if everybody woke up, we would certainly be allocating resources very differently.
Wildly different. If I could push the no more object consciousness button for all of planet Earth, it would be a pretty unrecognizable world. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We couldn't stop death. And so there's suffering in that because we lose, although we would know that death isn't what we think it is. Right? So, right. So I don't know. If we all woke up, maybe there wouldn't be any suffering. But Adyashanti once said something on a podcast interview. What's that one? The One You Feed?
Oh, yeah.
On that interview, he did an interview and he said something like, we would have a complete economic crisis if everybody woke up at once.
Yeah.
Guess no one would want to show up at their jobs anymore.
If everyone just did what was in alignment. But then ultimately, in clock time, things would come into alignment in a way that serves.
That's the theory. That seems to be the underlying trust. That's the trust I have. So yeah, I don't want to be a victim of my own conditioning anymore.
Preach that. Yes.
That's ultimately the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, for all of you smarty pants out there who understand psychology, or maybe you have a very deep relationship with the body and the soma, and you understand intergenerational trauma and how it gets passed down. I don't want to be a victim of my conditioning anymore because it's bullshit.
Yeah. And it hurts so much. And it's bullshit that hurts. It's so ridiculous. It helps nothing. It assists nothing. It's just pain. It's just pain.
Yes. Yeah, they're pain. And they're mistaken ideas.
Yeah.
Mistaken ideas. And you can see it all over the place. I mean, A.H. Almas in this book was saying something about, as the ego becomes crystallized and we start to experience the world through the perceptual filters of the ego, he's like, you never give yourself a break. Am I eating too much? Am I eating too little? Should I be eating this food? Should I be reading right now? Should I be resting instead? What about meditation? How about I meditate? Then you meditate and you're like, am I doing this right? Should I sit quieter? I think I should be quieter. Why aren't... And I was like, yes.
It's exhausting.
It's exhausting. We never give ourselves a break. And, we have all sorts of ideas about what women are, ideas about what men are, ideas about what people do, ideas about what love is, ideas about what we deserve. And I think, a lot of the awakening teachings are just pointing at, hey, these are just ideas. Get into the experience, which is why so many people point towards meditation, because that's one way to have an experience of what happens when you drop anticipation, when you drop concept, when you drop what you think you know, right? That's where the magic is. I want to add to what we were talking about earlier around, enlightenment and why maybe prior it was stressed as such a rare thing. And why it almost seemed like only a few can achieve it, so few can achieve.
Yeah, like once every 1,000 years.
Yeah, yeah. So I have a lot of ideas about this. So now know that these are just my ideas that I'm trying on for size. One of them being, well, if we understand that as we awaken, we live less from the constricted identity of the ego structure, more from our alive, awake nature, we can understand how easy it is for the ego to turn awakening or enlightenment into an object that it grasps after. We've used the saying before on the show, like the brass ring. So awakening becomes the brass ring. So there's a certain amount of not wanting to fan the flames of the ego,
right,
to get the ego seeking the brass ring of enlightenment, because as you turn that into an object to achieve, you go too far off course to experiencing the actual reality. So I think some of it was designed because a humble approach to practice is helpful, because an earnest and consistent approach to practice seems to be recommended, and because it's very, very easy for the ego to take awakening and turn it into an object, right? So I think that's part of it. I think the other part, and I don't stand alone in saying this. And in a lot of ways, I'm probably saying this just because I've heard other people say it. It seems that in modern times, it's just happening more. Mm-hmm. It seems possible it wasn't happening as much back then. I can't say that for a fact. I don't even know why it's important to discuss, but I suppose for myself, it's important to discuss because it's like popcorn. Like the kernels are just popping. And you and I get clients coming to us who are going through like awakening processes. Again, I feel like awakening is like a verb. It's a journey. It's like there might be something that someone can call an end point where I'm now officially enlightened. I don't know. But in my experience, it's this continuing unfolding where you're in closer and closer relationship to your true nature. And when you're dropping more and more perceptual filters that obstruct you from being there. So we get clients who come to us who are describing awakening experiences. So it's important because if you don't understand, if you don't have context for what you're going through, and we've read books like this, and you and I have spoken to people, you think you're crazy, you think you're losing it, you don't know how to support yourself, you don't know who to be reaching out to, and that just won't stand anymore. I'm very sensitive about the plight of the energetically sensitive soul, as I am one, and like, we've been through enough. We're so freaking aware. We feel so much. Like, let's not add to it that we can't be honest if we're actually waking up about the kind of support we need.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Praise be to that as well. Yeah. And that we can have really genuine, supportive conversations with each other, with teachers. And I mean this for people listening as well, who might be going through awakening experiences and maybe they have, a teacher or some form of support, that we can be really honest about what's going on and catch ourselves when we are making it into an object. When will I be over there, basically? Like, when will I have crossed the enlightenment finish line? And of course, there's just no such thing. I don't think there's such a thing. I think that there is enlightenment. Obviously, that's what we're talking about. But I don't think there's like, and stuck the landing, I'm done. I think that we are beings that are evolutionary through our tiny human lifespan, and then also species wide, and also the earth, and, things evolve. Things are alive here. Might be a very simple way of saying that. I notice aliveness is happening. And so there's no point at which aliveness stops. Some could say the death of the body. I don't know that that's true. I don't think that that's true. Except for that body. But yeah, anyway, my point being, if we talk about this in a genuine way as a evolving lived process, we will be more hip to how we turn it into an object to possess and be good at or bad at and achieving or failing at. And that really just helps this whole unfolding happen. I mean, first of all, we get support, like you said. But my idealistic self also feels like it assists with this process that seems to want to happen here. I know Eckhart Tolle's book, A New Earth, that's basically the vision that he lays out, which was that people like Jesus and Buddha were early flowerings of a certain kind of consciousness, and that ultimately it will be what the species does.
Yeah, that it's like the evolution of the species.
Yeah. And that as consciousness evolves through human bodies, that, that starts to just be what humanity is. And I don't know if he's right or wrong. I sure like entertaining the notion.
Yeah, I prefer to believe it. Sometimes I just have beliefs I prefer to have, and I don't hold them tightly. I allow them to flow in and out. It's just a construct to allow me to relax and to play with something and to enjoy the fun part about being a curious spiritual human. Like I see it. So I prefer to go, well, what if this was true? As opposed to the opposite. It's so funny. I was thinking about okay, so we all know about these gurus behaving badly and how many people have been like, I'm enlightened. And then they do this like crazy, horrific stuff, from like, simple disrespect and crossing of boundaries to like gross abuse, right? Of all sorts of kinds. And so it's always the spiritually sensitive souls who are like, I don't want to be like that. So I'm not going to think well of myself. I'm not going to even imagine I could be on this journey. Who am I to think it, right? And it's like, but that's not our problem. Like, we're not the ones who are most prone to that. That's the narcissistic personality type, right? Like, that's a different personality type who's really prone to that. Most of us who are in this community, who are energetically sensitive people, empathic people, intuitive people, like, the bigger problem we have is low self-esteem. We're not running around trying to dominate the world with our enlightened abilities.
Right.
So it's just funny. I'm sure there's some of you out there doing that, but it's funny to think of that we're so worried about that for ourselves. I don't want to seem like I think so well of myself.
I don't.
And yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I don't want to feel at all good about or confident about this experience that I'm having. And I'm saying this about myself because like I notice the aversion to joy, the aversion to just really letting something land, just really owning something.
And
it's so funny. Yeah. It's like, why?
Well, if you're actually in touch with reality, this is no big deal, right? Because everyone's got this. This is everyone's nature. No one's separate. So it's not a self-inflation.
Right.
But from the level of ego consciousness, it appears as if it's like in a self-aggrandizement or a self-inflation. For example, you and I both love Matt Kahn. And sometimes when people listen to him, people used to do this with Kieran Trace too. Oh, no, too much ego, too much this. They think too well of themselves. That's the level at which ego consciousness perceives. Mm-hmm. So I don't want them to think of me like that. So let me just downplay reality, downplay my aliveness, downplay the truth that this is available to everyone. I mean, if you're in touch with the reality that we're all that and we're all evolving there, no one's standing out above the rest.
Yeah.
And you know that to be true. So you're speaking from that level, right?
Right. It becomes really quite funny. Like there's a place as it deepens what the experience is. It's really funny because it's like pointing out the world's most obvious thing. I mean, my favorite one is like proof of God, right? Like I notice things are alive here. Like it's funny. It's just so obvious. It's not complicated. It doesn't take mystical powers for me to go like, I'm animated. I'm talking the earth in my backyard that I can see. Like, so there is a comic level. There is, I think, many comic levels to this, but it's so basic. So it's not claiming some kind of superior. And unfortunately, like we said, but we have seen so many people abuse the notion of the superior one who can hand over the special treats, the special gifts. And that you are not sovereign. Your beliefs, feelings, opinions don't exist because you just need to follow it. Like it's really heartbreaking. And so I think that one of the things that we're also going through as a species is healing from that. What better way to heal from that than just to let ourselves take the journey so that we can be like, that's crazy that somebody would abuse others in the name of this kind of process. Like it's just crazy.
Or it would be crazy to think that anyone could put themselves above others.
Yeah.
Or have the answers. In a way, this conversation, I don't just mean ours, but this larger conversation is set up to protect us because it's not so outside of us. It's not so mystical. When people see teachers, especially if they're from a different culture, so it already holds a different level of mysticism and other to it, it's very easy to say, well, they have that. I don't have that. It's separate from me. It's outside of me. It's mystical. So it's above. And, let them break me open. Let them show me how. But if you understand that we're all on this journey, that is happening. Like, not only are we on this journey, but if we put it into an action term, as in awakening, as in a process, y'all are doing it already. It doesn't happen, right? and then within it, you already are that. So why are we so embarrassed to be talking about it? And furthermore, it's funny. It's like, what's the fear? I'm the most mystical babe, and I don't know what the fear is of being mystical out loud. I mean, probably just some old parental fear, some old family fear of not wanting to be the weird one, but it's time where people like ourselves, all of you listening, I mean, you guys are like, so our community, obviously, who are bridging it, practical, reasonable, grounded, present, intelligent, but also deeply knowing, deeply trusting, deeply believing, deeply pursuing, and open-minded and open-hearted and open-spirited to be playing with all these things. Like, maybe past lives do exist. Maybe they do. Maybe our souls have a calling. I don't know. I was reading a book the other day that a guy has spirit guides, and he brought back the idea to me of new and old souls. I don't know. That's fun to play with. What would it mean if I played with that? Because what happens to me when I play with different wisdom that comes at me from other people is I don't take it to be the truth. I use it to like break my other concepts up against the rocks. Like, what if this could be true? Then that implies that yours is not necessarily true. And I just use it to break it all up against the rocks in this really fun way. So I guess, for me, it's a big step, because people who talk about mystical things in my family were perceived as out of touch with reality.
Yeah.
And here we are saying in this community, this is our reality. This is reality.
And looping back to that, we're coming back from being on a break for 6 weeks. There was something about having that 6-week respite where what we're doing here in both of us independently was allowed to really deepen, and we could really feel into it. And it's fun, so fun and so exciting to come back. And it's nice when you have a pause like that, because it can be like, you can look back sort of as chapter 1, chapter 2, even though it's 2 years and then a 6-week break and then now whatever. It feels like the beginning of Bliss and Grit. And in many ways, just because, and not because like I'm disavowing all that work was trash. That's not what I mean. I love all the work we did before, but there was this timidity, right? Shame, we could even say, like being a little cautious for sure, a little ashamed, lots of vulnerability hangovers about talking about what we actually want to talk about. And there's a distinct like stepping forward that happened in our time off. And so it's exciting to be back here and to be at the beginning of chapter 2.
It is exciting. And y'all have watched us go through so much. I mean, you've literally watched us on this journey, or heard us, so to speak. So I know we could have ended right where you said that, Brooke, because that was perfect. But I just wanted to add, I'd love to hear from you guys. So, you hear our website and the intro and the outro, but just in case you don't listen to that, it's blissandgrit.com, and you can email us at dear@blissandgrit. And do you relate to this? Can we get a what? Anyone out there?
Thank you so much for listening to today's show. The show notes, including any resources we mentioned, live as always at blissandgrit.com. If you go to the website, you'll see each episode's separate post, and the resources are going to be in there. Our member platform is at patreon.com/blissandgrit. You can donate to support the show. You can also get rewards for your support. So if you're wanting to engage with these topics in a deeper way, have a little more community, have a little more resource, that's a great place to go. And you can also come play with us on Instagram or Facebook, or subscribe at the website, which again is blissandgrit.com. We are very grateful for all the reviews you've written, for the membership support you've provided, and all the notes that you send. They definitely kept us feeling good and nourished and happy on our time off. Here's an iTunes review from Lilikoi, Hawaii. Brooke and Vanessa bring a deep, sincere, all-encompassing wisdom to their conversations. So many times I've been listening to a conversation and, for the first time in over a decade of absorbing spiritual teachings, I feel like the topic has been holistically, pragmatically, and kindly covered with humorous acknowledgement of the inherent paradox that is human life. These two have an ability to discuss very abstract spiritual topics in a way that helps me bring vague, woo-woo, feel-good ideas into my real life and sometimes too real relationships. Thank you for adding to my spiritual self-care in a way that feels genuine and authentic. I look forward to every episode. Thank you so much. Hearing those kinds of things just does our hearts so much good, and we are thrilled to be back. So until next week, thank you again.